In this video, I'm going to be replacing the fan clutch in this 2004 Chevy Failblazer with a 4.2 liter 6-cylinder engine. Okay, what we're dealing with here is removing this nut on the water pump pulley so that we can get this fan out so we can replace the clutch. In order to get the clutch completely out, we got to remove the shroud. So we'll have to disconnect this wiring harness. We'll remove a couple of bolts here and here. We'll need to disconnect the transmission lines, which look like they're already out of the clamps. We'll need to disconnect the upper radiator hose and do a little MacGyvering and cut out a section on this so we can slide it over the top of this hard plastic nipple that this water hose connects to. There really isn't a whole lot as far as fasteners and stuff that we need to remove, but this one is the tricky one. First thing I'm gonna do is remove the serpentine belt by loosening this tensioner right here. Put my wrench down in here, and then I'm gonna use a box end wrench to go over the end of the handle. We're gonna use that for leverage. I like using the regular socket wrench and the box end because I can swivel it around and separate it and not run into the sensor here or the radiator hose. Went ahead and pulled everything out of the parts Failblazer. You see I've got the nut off of that, and that was not easy. I tried several methods to hold that pulley still to remove that nut off of the center of that post. I spent over an hour trying to loosen it, and I never did get it loose, and said, you know what, I'm going to go online and find a proper tool to remove that, because I have several of these Trailblazers. I've had to remove that nut before, and I've rented tools in the past. So I thought I'm just gonna buy my own tool. And I was looking at the reviews of this particular tool that I found, and one of them was a video of a guy removing the nut off of there in like less than 5 minutes. And the vehicle he was working on was a Trailblazer. So I was sold, got it off of there in about 10 minutes. That nut was really stuck on there. So this is the tool. It's the fan clutch service kit by Gear Wrench. I think I paid about 80 bucks for this. You get this long forked wrench here on a pivot, and that will hold the pulley still. And you need the fan nut wrench. Mine happens to be a 36 millimeter. And another reason why I bought this tool, and I have to replace the water pump on my Sierra, it has a clutch fan as well. This will come in handy for that. All right, so we're going to use this with the 2 notches on it. We're going to put these around the bolts that are holding the pulley to the water pump. Okay, that'll give us the leverage we need to put the 36 millimeter wrench on the nut itself. And we're just going to twist opposite of each other and hopefully break this nut loose quickly. All right, I put the straight part on the bottom, and I used the pivoted arm on the top. I actually had that upside down the first attempt, and it's just spread apart. Backwards was. So at this point, I went ahead and spun the nut off the end of the pulley. Next, I'm going to undo the clamp for the wiring harness and undo the wiring harness itself. And now I'm going to go after the top radiator hose. These clamps are awesome because when you squeeze them together, there's this little pin right here. Once it gets to a certain point, it will catch on there, keeps the clamp open so that you can move the clamp around. So what I'm gonna do is pull the hose off. I'm gonna try to funnel all this fluid that comes out down into a bucket that I've got sitting directly underneath the vehicle. I'm trying to minimize some mess here. Can't believe it. It actually kind of sort of worked. I am sort of amazed at myself. The shroud is not going anywhere because of this nipple for the radiator. We can get this out without removing the radiator because we can notch a chunk out of this shroud right here. And I've done this with my other Failblazers, and I've not seen any issue with removing the plastic. It's just something you got to do if you don't want to do another 15 steps or so to get this thing off of here. We're going to go the lazy route. We're just going to drill a bunch of perforations on each side of here, and we'll just knock that little piece of plastic out, and Bob's your uncle. gonna take this flathead screwdriver and just kind of punch this thing out. There it goes. Nice big hole for us to pull that out now. If these were in those brackets right there, we'd go ahead and pop those out. But so this thing's ready to slide on up out of here. Slide that up. Okay, so I got the nut off the end of the water pump, so that's not gonna be stuck in the way.
Now I'm going to remove this clutch from the fan. I'm going to disconnect this wiring harness right here, remove this clamp and protective hose, and get this wiring out of this really tight contraption right here, and kind of boogered up the sheathing on the wires. Fix that up later.
These are 13mm nuts.
So the clutch is stuck to the fan itself. I'm going to use a little physics here, put this little block of wood underneath the one end, curb stomp it, and it popped right out. So putting it all back together is pretty straightforward. Just put it on in reverse of the way you took it off.
Well, like it took me forever, but I finally got that wiring harness down in that odd clip thing, and it's connected. Time to go back in the car. Okay, we're about to put this back in, and what I'm looking for are these tabs down here and the transmission cooler lines. We've got 2 pegs on the bottom, and of course we've got our notch for the radiator pipe. Trying not to hit the radiator and bust up all these fins. That would be a drag. I've got one little hook that goes into a slot right here. Let me make sure that fits in place. There we go. I think I finally got the 2 pegs in the proper spot. At least I thought it did. This peg is just not going in the hole. Why? There it goes. Okay then, it's in. Got the nut started. We'll do this by hand, and then we'll tighten it down with our fan clutch tool. Put a little bit of anti-seize on the threads. Alright, good enough for me.
I'm going to go ahead and put this top radiator hose back on and line up the clamps. There's some indentions in the rubber of the hose. Kind of shows you where the clamp was when you took it off. I always try to line that back up. You put this wiring connector back together and attach these 2 bolts. And I'm thinking we're smelling the finish line here, fellas. Either that or it's BO, one of the 2.
Okay, about ready to put the serpentine belt on. If you ever forget which way the serpentine belt goes on, look at your shroud. There's usually a diagram. That's the pattern I gotta follow right there, with that pulley right there being the tensioner pulley. I guess I'm gonna snake this down here and loop this over the crank pulley. And then it loops over the water pump, and then snakes down to the very bottom right-hand pulley, which is the air conditioner pulley. Okay, then we loop back towards the water pump, to the idler pulley, back to the outside towards the battery. And that goes around the alternator. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and loosen tension. And the last little bit of this belt goes around the power steering pump. So the last thing we need to do is top this off. I looked at the coolant that's down in the bucket, and there's quite a bit of filth in it, so I can't put that back in here. So I'm gonna put some fresh fluid down in here, top it off, and we're done.
All right, we'll just let this thing idle for a few minutes, check for leaks, make sure it doesn't get hot. So that's pretty much it. That's how I changed the fan clutch on this 04 Failblazer.